Anybody?
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, and first and foremost, thank you so much for being here tonight for our second session in the Wired for Wonder ADHD Summer Series. Tonight, our session is titled Now What? Turning Understanding into Support. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, so thank you guys if you were here for the last session for continuing this journey with me. And if you're new here, welcome, and don't worry, you didn't miss too much. We are just thrilled to have everyone here. So we'll spend a few minutes catching up so everyone's kind of on the same page. So during our last session, we took what I called the dirt road to neuroscience, and we spent the evening answering one big question: why? Why do ADHD brains work the way they do? Why do we see the behaviors that we see? Why try harder doesn't usually work? And we talked about dopamine, executive functioning, brain development, and how understanding the brain changes how we see ADHD. But I know many of you probably left thinking, okay, now I understand the brain. Okay, now what? Now what do I do with that? And honestly, that's the right question. So, because understanding without action doesn't really change anything, does it? So tonight is all about taking everything that we learned at our last session and turning it into practical support that you can actually use today. So quick show of hands, how many of you have ever found yourself thinking, I've tried everything and nothing seems to work? Or we've had the same exact argument 100 times? Or, why won't they just do it? Anybody? Yeah. All right, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. So tonight, instead of adding 100 more strategies to your toolbox, I want to teach you how to figure out which strategy fits the problem. So, I fight with this every time. It's a little about me, but we're not going to waste any time on that. This is our roadmap for tonight. So this is where we're headed. We're going to do a really quick review just so everyone kind of starts from the same place, even though we unpacked a lot in our last session. If you were not able to be here for that one, the recording is on the Blacksburg Library YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and watch that, or if you would like the handouts we had from that, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to send that information to you. So then I'm going to introduce what I call my ADHD detective framework. And this framework honestly changed the way that I look at ADHD. I didn't invent the science behind it, but it's something I created based on bringing together ideas from neuroscience, executive functioning research, behavioral sciences, and just my own experiences as a teacher, a mom, and a person living with ADHD. So this is going to change the way we ask questions, and I think it's going to change the way that you guys look at behavior too. And then after that, we're going to talk about the executive functions one by one. And instead of just defining them, we're going to talk about exactly what they look like in real life and what you can do to identify them and what we can do to support them. And then we're going to put on our detective hats and solve a couple real life case files together. And then finally, I'll leave you with some of my favorite tools, apps, and resources that you can take home. All right, so quick recap. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because we really went into depth on it during our last session, and we have like 3 hours of content to cover in 1 hour today, so y'all buckle up. But there's a few things that I want everyone to remember, and that is ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's not laziness, it's not bad parenting, it's not lack of motivation, it's not lack of intelligence. It's just simply the brain is literally developing and functioning differently. Second, the prefrontal cortex. It's going to be that part right behind your forehead. See, prefrontal cortex here. That is what we talked about as the CEO of the brain. Within that prefrontal cortex is our air traffic controller, which is our executive functions. And that is a part of the brain in people with ADHD that a lot of times develops more slowly than it does in neurotypicals. So this means skills like organizing, planning, emotional regulation, working memory, and task initiation don't always come naturally. And finally, the most hopeful thing that we talked about is that brains can change. We know that neuroplasticity can build new pathways and that the goal isn't perfection. The goal is always progress. All right. Y'all ready? Now what? All right, so the question becomes now what? Because here's what I see happen all the time. A child forgets their homework and a parent is like, why can't you be more responsible? Or, a student refuses to start an assignment. I see this all the time as a teacher. And the teacher says, stop procrastinating or stop being lazy. Or if a child's melting down, we're like, calm down. That's not what that child needs in that moment, even though I'm guilty of the same thing. We're trying to solve the behavior. But what if we're trying to solve the wrong problem? All right, so tonight we're gonna build your toolbox. So the information that I'm giving you, these are tools, right? So sometimes it takes more than one tool for your child to be successful. So things that could be in your toolbox, your child might need medication, maybe they don't. It's definitely gonna be their sleep routine, maybe exercise, maybe executive functioning coaching, which is kind of what you're getting here. Their environment, school supports, technology, relationships, therapy, nutrition, all of these things. Every single child is different. And you have to use what works for you or for your child. So you have to combine tools that support the whole child. And then, if it might not work, and that's okay. And you have to refine, adjust, and keep trying. You are their biggest tool. Please don't forget that. And with the right support, they can grow. Remember, progress, not perfection, every step. All right, so let's build this toolbox. So you will notice on your second page, you all have a copy of this. This is going to be sort of your executive functioning cheat sheet that I made for you. These will correspond with a larger graphic in my slides. So if you signed in and you asked for the slides, you'll have access to those too that go in a little bit more depth. This is just sort of like the watered down version, a little quick sneak peek. So when you're being a detective and you're trying to remember all these things, you can glance at it and hopefully it's just a little quick reference for you. Okay, so the biggest mistake we make is we're trying to solve the symptom instead of the bottleneck. So I want you to imagine that you have 6 lanes of traffic on the interstate and all of them are trying to merge into one spot. Then suddenly, you have a traffic jam. And the traffic jam isn't actually the problem. The traffic jam is the result of the bottleneck. And that bottleneck could be that one car that's going 10 miles under the speed limit, or, everybody trying to be in one place at the same time. That congestion, that's the bottleneck. As a result of the bottleneck, we've created a traffic jam. So the traffic jam are going to be the behaviors that you see, that meltdown or, the refusal to start something or, all those things. Those are our behaviors. That's going to be the traffic jam. What we need to do is figure out what caused the traffic jam, what caused those behaviors to happen. And so this is where we become detectives. So again, the forgotten homework, the messy backpack, those are all traffic jams, but it's our job as parents, educators, and caregivers to find out where's the bottleneck. Because if we only focus on that traffic jam, we're never going to fix what caused it. All right, so here's my ADHD detective framework. On the back of your sheet where the note taking is, I've given you sort of a little cheat sheet there too that shows you the steps and the framework. So over the last few years, working with students, studying neuroscience, and living with ADHD myself, I found myself sort of coming back to the same way of thinking. And I started organizing it into what I now call this detective framework. And this is honestly the biggest idea that I hope you guys leave with tonight. And I want you to stop thinking like a firefighter and start thinking like a detective. So a firefighter's job is to go in and put out fires. A detective's job is to go in and ask questions, to look for patterns, and to figure out the cause of why something happened. So I want you to change your thinking. You're not just trying to, get rid of the problem. You're trying to figure out why it happened. So I don't want you to immediately ask, how do I stop this? Instead, ask, what is this behavior trying to tell me? Because as we know, all behavior is a form of communication. So first, you're going to look at the behavior. What am I seeing? Maybe it's that disorganization. Maybe it's the meltdown. Maybe it's, the forgotten homework. Second, you're going to try to figure out which executive function might be making this difficult. Now, here's the catch. A lot of executive functions overlap. A lot of times you might have more than one that are, sort of under attack in that moment. But again, coming from a place of understanding, changing your mindset and changing the way you view it is going to help you have a place to start. It's going to help you really get to the root of what is causing these behaviors, even if it's more than one thing. And sometimes these solutions can fix multiple things. So then after you figure out kind of where I think we are with the executive function, you're going to ask, what does the brain need? What does the brain need right now? Then you're going to support it with, what support or strategy will help. It could be a tool, it could be an environmental change. And then you're going to teach it. How do I explicitly teach the child how to use this support? Maybe not in that moment when we've flipped our lid and we're freaking out. That's not the time to teach. But when we are regulated and, that's going to be the time to teach those supports. And then last, we have to practice. We have to practice it consistently over time. Because here's the other thing. I hear parents all the time say, well, I did it twice and it didn't work. Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do it more than that. It might take 20 times. It might take 40 times, and then it might still not work. And you might have to, regroup and try to figure it out. But that's okay. Again, you're still asking the right questions. You're still going to make progress if you use this model and this way of thinking. So, learning executive functioning is just like learning to play the piano or ride a bike or learning to read. It takes repetition, it takes practice, it takes patience, and it takes skills. But skills can be taught, and that's our job as parents and teachers to teach those skills. But before we dive into each executive function, I want to point something out. As adults, we use executive functioning supports all the time. We set alarms, we use calendars, we use GPS, we make grocery lists, we put appointments in our phones, we use sticky notes, we have Alexa remind us, but nobody looks at another adult and says, well, you really should be able to remember that without your calendar, right? So why do we expect kids whose brains are still developing to do something that even we don't do without support? And I think it's kind of, this taboo thing. It's like, oh, they need extra help or accommodations. It's like, well, so do adults. And we're doing those things all the time. We just don't call them that. So I don't know about you, but I don't trust my memory. Okay. I trust my systems. Like y'all see me up here, if I'm trusting my working memory, you guys are not going to have a presentation. You're going to have a big old ramble about something else that's not relevant to this. But that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. So every strategy we're going to discuss is simply another system. And our goal isn't to make children dependent upon supports. Our goal is to teach them how to build the same kinds of supports that successful adults use every single day. So let's start with our first executive function. And this one does me dirty every day. Working memory. All right. So quick show of hands. How many of you have ever walked into a room and you're like, why did I come in here? Like every second of every day, right? But most of the time, you're like, oh yeah, I've got my phone charger. I came to let the dog out, or I came to do whatever. But for someone with ADHD, sometimes that information is just gone. It's just, that's working memory. So I like to think of working memory as the brain's sticky note. And basically it's just the ability to hold information in your mind and use it or long enough to actually use it in that moment. So, the thing is, some people have these big whiteboards in their brains and they can hold lots of information and it's wonderful, and some people have a sticky note, and sometimes that's okay. But then people with ADHD, sometimes we have like one of those little sticky notes, right? But it's not even like the Post-it brand. It's like the Dollar Tree brand and it doesn't stick good. And then it just like falls off. That's what it's like with the ADHD working memory. So I see this all the time with my students. And it is very difficult to teach students who have low working memory because they can't hold on to the information long enough to do anything with it. And this kid, if I give her a direction, like 2 directions, right? I mean, she's immediately forgotten both of them. Or, you know, if we're reading something, she has forgotten the first sentence before we get to the second sentence. But ask her about something she's interested in. This kid can tell you every single car that every single teacher drives in the parking lot. She knows if they get a new car. She knows if they weren't there that day. I mean, this kid knows every single car. And one day I walked in and she said, Mrs. Jones, don't forget, you have a dentist appointment tomorrow at 3. You have to leave early. And I was like, you're right. Like, I do. And like, I could tell her I have an appointment 3 months from now, and this kid will remember it and she'll be spot on. But anything I'm teaching her, gone, won't remember it from 5 minutes to the next, right? And so it's like, and that's because ADHD is not a memory disorder. It's a working memory disorder. And so the brain is much better at holding on to information that is meaningful, it's interesting, or emotionally important to that person. And she happens to just be very invested in my personal appointments. And one day, when I take this show on the road, she's going to be my personal assistant. I'm telling you. All right, so what are some supports that offload working memory? All right, so just like we were saying that working memory is kind of like the sticky note in the brain. So the reason why we make notes, right, is so we don't forget, because we're offloading that information. So think about it like, all right, well, I have this place right here to hold on to information, but then if I put it out of my brain, well, I also have this place to put it, and this place to put it, and this place to put it. So I've like created more space in my brain by offloading it and externalizing it. So my kids that really struggle with working memory, a lot of them are going to get things like audio. Obviously, kids who are still learning to read, we're still teaching them how to read, but audio for those kids that already know how to read is huge because they can focus on the comprehension piece and not, you know, trying to struggle to figure out what they're reading, right? We're offloading that working memory. So things like checklists, sticky notes, dry erase boards, picture schedules, you know, visual timers. Let me show you. I brought some props. I love the Big Daddy of timers here. It's big. I can see it from the back of my classroom. I have one of these in my house for myself because also I can't be trusted with anything. So I love this. You can make it make a sound. You can make it not make a sound if that throws kids off. But look how visual, you know, these kids can actually see that the time is moving. Also, they make ones like these on Amazon. These are great. You can actually put a to-do list. You can personalize it. There's like a dry erase marker where you can make your own. And then your kid can check off all the things they've done that morning and you can time them. But again, they can visualize that time. So again, one thing I like to do is obviously I can read and have a master's degree and all those things, but I love Audible. I love to be able to look, or what I'll do is I'll have it read like articles out loud to me while I follow along with them. And it's giving me 2 ways to process information because that helps my brain and that's okay. There's also, I'm going to show you at the end, an app or a website called Goblin Tools that will break down complex tasks. It's amazing. I'll show you guys at the end how to use that. But also just teaching your kids, like ask, can you email me the instructions? Can you allow me time to write this down? You know, or can you put all this information on a handout, which I gave to you guys to offload your working memory. All right. So, again, if working memory is the bottleneck, our goal isn't to help someone remember better, it's to help the brain remember better. So again, we've talked about all the ways that adults already do this, but we want to build environments that remember for the brain. So instead of giving 5 verbal directions, write them down. Instead of hoping they'll remember their backpacks, create a launch pad next to the door. Or instead of expecting them to remember everything they read, let them listen while they follow along. And again, you've got to stop thinking the next time someone forgets something, it's like, oh, well, they don't care. Well, working memory might be our bottleneck, and then now we know where to start. Does this make sense? Following with me? All right. So let's keep on moving. So this is the graphic that goes along with this, and I will share it with you in your slides, and it breaks down working memory a lot better. But you have the condensed version, so you can keep it in your pocket. So when your kid's having a meltdown, you're like, what's the bottleneck? So I expect all of you to do that. Stop, pull out your pocket guide. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so how many of you have ever looked at your child or even yourself and thought, why won't you just start? The dishes, the laundry that's like overflowing in my basement right now. Or like as a teacher, you're like, you've been sitting there for 30 minutes and you won't pick up a pencil. And so I think this is one of the most misunderstood executive functions, because from the outside, it truly does look like laziness, but most of the time that's actually not what's happening. So I want you to think of a car, and the engine works and the wheels are good and there's gas in the tank and everything's ready to go. But you go to turn that key and it's like, it just won't start. And that's what task initiation feels like. It's like, I know I need to do it. I even want to do it. I'm even feeling guilty that I'm not doing it. But somehow I'm still sitting there, not doing it. And I do this all the time. Like I'll have one important email that I need to send. And I know that email is only going to take me 10 minutes to just sit down and write it. But instead I'm like, I'm going to reorganize this drawer, or I'm going to go like clean the kitchen. And
why are you talking about me?
I know it's a personal attack on everybody in this room, but you do everything except the one thing that you were supposed to be doing. And that's why sometimes we talk about ADHD paralysis. So that's that the task feels so overwhelming that instead of doing something, you just end up doing nothing, or everything except the one thing you were supposed to do, which I like to call productive procrastination, because I was productive. I just wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing in that moment. So some strategies that help. How do we get started? So again, if task initiation is that bottleneck, if that's what's blocking us from, doing what we need to be doing and creating all these behaviors, we're not just going to tell someone, just try harder. Come on, just do it. Why can't you just do it? All right, that's not going to help. We have to start by making it easier. And again, the biggest mistake we say is go write your research paper. All right, well, where do you even start? So instead, sometimes you have to make that first step incredibly small. Not write your paper. Maybe it's open the laptop. Maybe it's go find your notebook. Maybe it's, just anything. Maybe it's write one sentence. Just anything to get the engine started. I also love body doubling. Just sometimes having another person in the room, just sitting there with you, not talking to you, makes a huge difference. Or like one thing I do is I'll be talking on the phone and I'm like cleaning while I'm talking on the phone. And it's just something about having someone there on the other line, like makes me more motivated to do things. So it's kind of the virtual body doubling. Another favorite of mine is the 5-minute rule. So like you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. Because once people get started, they'll usually keep going. And again, we'll talk about Goblin tools again. This one is highly recommended. It takes overwhelming tasks. For example, I could say clean my room, and I can adjust how much I want it to break this task down. Maybe I only wanted to break it down into 3 steps. Maybe I want it into 30 steps. And I can adjust it, and it'll tell me step by step of what to do and where to break it down. And it also does a lot of other cool things that hopefully we'll get to talk about. But it's on your list of recommended apps. Definitely check that one out. So again, the next time someone is struggling to just get started, don't think they're lazy. Just think, okay, task initiation is this bottleneck, and now we know where to start. Oh, they get me every time. All right, so sometimes people do get started and then something else gets in the way. So let's talk about emotional regulation. And I think this one gets people in trouble more than almost any other executive function. And, have you ever had one of those days? Today was that day for me, where everything goes wrong. Every single thing you touch goes wrong. You have dropped everything you have touched. Every inconvenience that could possibly happen has happened. And then someone asks you a question and you snap. Like you just lose it. Anybody done that? Nobody? So it's just me? Okay, this is awkward. So no, I was kidding. But again, you spill your coffee, you're running late, you're stuck behind the slow car, somebody, all the things. So again, when you snapped, it wasn't that one little question that set you off, was it? It was all the things that built up to that thing. And then that person just happened to get the, short end of the stick at that time. So imagine feeling this multiple times a day, every day. That's what it can feel like for people with ADHD. That constant feeling of like, I'm going to snap. I'm on edge. My amygdala is in overdrive. So I like to think of this as the brain's emotional thermostat. So a thermostat doesn't stop the weather. It helps to regulate the temperature, right? So our brains do the same thing with emotions. We all get frustrated. We all get angry. And the goal isn't to never have big emotions. The goal is to regulate them. But for many people with ADHD, that thermostat doesn't always work super efficiently. And, not only can emotions get big really quickly, they also tend to take longer to come back down. So, what does this actually look like? Like maybe you've seen small frustrations just become really big reactions. They yell, they scream, they cry, they argue, they shut down. And from the outside, you're like, you're overreacting. But here's what I want you to remember. Just because the trigger was small doesn't mean the emotion feels small to them. And just because you think it's ridiculous doesn't mean that they're feeling like it's ridiculous. And it's not really fair for you to tell them how they're feeling, because inside it feels really, really big to them. And that's adults, that's kids, that's everyone. So again, think about the last time you were completely overwhelmed. You probably weren't thinking your best. Well, neither were they. So what do? We have to regulate first and then teach later. Can I tell you what most of us do? The exact opposite, right? We lecture, we explain, why did you do that? We're yelling, whatever, but their brain isn't available for learning. When someone is emotionally overwhelmed, literally the thinking part of their brain goes offline. It does not work. It simply does not work. So it's all the way down here in this like primal reptilian brain that's just about survival. So you sitting there trying to negotiate or trying to reason, they cannot reason with you in that moment. So you have to make sure they're regulated before you can even begin to have those conversations. And you also have to make sure that you're regulated, because what's the first thing we want to do? We get mad, right? We're not regulated. So guess what they're doing? They're feeding off our energy. We're like, just calm down. And it's like, well, you're not calm. Like, what are you talking about? Right? So your biggest task in that moment is for you to stay rational, for you to keep that rational and thinking brain online, because somebody's got to be rational, like in the moment. All right. This probably needs to be the grown-up, but it's very difficult. Then again, you should see me with my daughter. Do as I say, not as I do. All right. But again, so like the logic, the lectures, the consequences, like long conversations, they're not going to be effective. So, it's like trying to teach algebra to someone who's running from a bear. All right. Like they're thinking about surviving. They're not thinking about the algebra. So I also want you to think about these 3 levels. So frustrated. Okay. That's where you can do the coaching, right? We're just frustrated. You can, maybe they're just complaining, they're arguing, refusing, crying. And this is where you can coach. This is where I like to use humor. I might be like, whoa, I don't teach baby velociraptors, but there's one in my room right now, and like sometimes we can laugh and, get away from that. But then if we go to level 2, this is where you want to do less talking, more regulating. Maybe you're just saying, I'm here, you're safe. Or, it's just maybe just being there, being calm. Maybe you're modeling what they should be doing. You're taking some deep breaths, you're staying calm, you're staying relaxed. Easier said than done, but then sometimes we get to level 3. All right. If you're a special education teacher like I am, we be getting to level 3. So at this point, your priority is no longer teaching. Your priority is safety. If they're throwing chairs, if they're running away, if they're hitting, biting, destroying property, threatening others, your priority is safety. This is not a time to teach. This is not a time to lecture. It's just simply your job to keep everyone safe. The goal has now changed. So When everyone is calm, that's when the learning is going to happen. But I think one of the hardest things as adults is separating the behavior from the child. You can be angry or frustrated with the behavior, but again, the behavior is not the child. It's communication. It's a result. It's a symptom of something else. It's that bottleneck causing that traffic jam. But remember, we're detectives. We're not firefighters. The behavior is giving us information. So the next time someone has a really big emotion, instead of asking, why are they acting like this? I need you to ask, what does the brain need right now? Maybe it needs more space. Maybe it's movement. Maybe it's fewer words. Maybe it's co-regulation. Like, I know when I'm up here and I'm mad, don't come at me with some reasonable logic, anything. Like, you need to let me be mad. And then after I'm mad, I'll be okay and I'll be reasonable. Or the next day I might apologize. But, maybe, ask my husband, maybe. But, it's, let me back up. Oh, no. So again, what's going to help? You co-regulation before self-regulation. So you want to make sure that you're regulating with them before you're just focusing on them being regulated. Also validate their emotion. Like, I can see that you're frustrated or you are angry or whatever. Like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be frustrated. And again, I think sometimes as parents, like, we forget to say, like, it's okay to feel other things. It's not okay to throw a chair at your brother. That's really where the difference comes from. Maybe they need movement. Maybe they need sensory supports. Everybody on your thing, you notice these little bumpy things. They're stickers. And sometimes kids can just trace them when they're feeling frustrated. Again, if they're like at a level 3, they're probably going to throw it at you and it's not going to be effective. But before that, sometimes if kids are feeling anxious or they're feeling like, I'm starting to feel dysregulated, these are really cool little tools they can put on their desks or their computers or have them in the car, and they can just sort of rub their fingers on them or trace them and breathe. And for a lot of kids, it's really helpful. Predictable routines. All right. Keep things predictable. And then practice the regulation when they're calm. Talk about, again, a different day, not after this, like a different day when we're calm, we're normal. Have the conversation. Like, when you start to feel frustrated, where do you feel it in your body? Right? Like me, when I start to get mad, like I can feel my chest getting tight, right? I feel like I'm getting, like my breath is getting shorter. Talk about, maybe they feel it in their stomach, maybe they feel it in their head. Have those conversations when they're regulated, and then say, okay, when I start feeling that, I know that's my body telling me that I need space or I need, this or that. All right. And then model it. We have to model it for our kids. If we are constantly dysregulated, our kids are going to constantly be dysregulated. Again, easier said than done. You guys do not want to come to my house. All right. So what's not going to help? Calm down, lectures, arguing, and consequences in the middle of the meltdown. Not going to help. So connection before correction. All right. Oh, we're running out of time. All right. Next, we're going to talk about time blindness. So again, people with ADHD, many times their internal clock is now and not now. And so tomorrow, not now. 3 hours from now, not now. Let's do it midnight. Oh, it's 7, not now. 3 months from now, definitely not now. And then all of a sudden it's now. Okay. So raise your hand if you've ever looked at the clock and thought, oh, I have plenty of time. So you decide, I'm going to unload the dishwasher and I'm going to scroll on TikTok and I'm going to do whatever. And then all of a sudden, you're leaving the house 15 minutes late. You have one shoe on, you forgot your coffee. Like it happens all the time, right? So that's time blindness. So really with ADHD brains, it's not that they don't know how to tell time. It's their body does not accurately feel the passing of time. Like they literally don't feel it. And so again, they could look at that and say, oh, that project will only take 5 minutes. And then 45 minutes later, they're still doing it. Or, like, I think I have plenty of time until suddenly it's due tomorrow. And, they always wait until the last minute. And that's because many times the brain didn't experience that deadline as urgent, until it was urgent, right? I have my colleague and one of my good friends, he always says, if it ain't pressing, I ain't addressing. Like if it ain't important, it's a later me problem. And so, and I don't know about y'all, but I can waste some time. I can waste 2 hours and then suddenly, like when there's 5 minutes left and I have to have this done, I become unbelievably productive, right? So, it's amazing how that little bit of pressure adds to it. So if time blindness is the bottleneck, what is going to help? All right, visual timers, all right? If, one thing is, I have one of my girlfriends, I love her so much, but Lord, she is never on time. She is always late. She's like, oh yeah, Mom, I'll be there, whatever. I'm about to leave my house. She's getting in the shower. Okay. Or like your husband always, you're like, okay, it's time to leave. And they're like, all right, I'm going to go shower now. No, like, what are you doing? Like, happens all the time. So what she did is like, she's like, oh, well, it only takes me 30 minutes to get ready. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It takes you 2 hours to get ready. So I was like, what I want you to do is I want you to record yourself getting ready. I want you to set a timer and I want you to see how long did it take you to do that. And so she did, like, do your normal routine, whatever, but set a timer and see how long. It's very eye-opening, right? But sometimes people need that. Sometimes they're like, oh, like, and they genuinely had no idea. So again, time estimates on Goblin Tools. Also, there's a time estimator. You can say, how long should something like this take? And it can give you an estimate of how much time it should take. Calendars and reminders. Let me tell you guys, I have to have it right in front of me or I'm not going to do it. I have the fridge calendar. I have my office calendar. I have my desk calendar. I have my Google calendar. I have my purse calendar. Like, again, that works for me. If I don't have it in every single place, it's not going to happen. Routines, and then build in buffer time. If I know something should take me an hour, I double it. I give myself 2 hours because I know there's going to be a disaster. I know my daughter's going to have a meltdown. I know I'm going to rip the, whole backside out of my pants before I leave and something's going to happen. So I make time for that. Leave time for a disaster. So again, people with ADHD often don't have a time management problem. They have a time awareness problem. All right. Oh my gosh. Speaking of working memory, I can't remember how this works. All right, so we're gonna have to speed her up. Organization, this is the brain's filing cabinet. So how many of you have like the junk drawer at your house? It's got the cords, it's got the manual from the dishwasher that you got rid of 2 years ago, batteries, some birthday candles, like, all right. So organization isn't just about having like a messy room or a messy desk. Again, a lot of times an ADHD brain, like their whole brain is the junk drawer, right? My whole brain is junk. And again, there's good stuff in there, but there's no system to access it. So again, organization is about creating a system so your brain doesn't have to work so hard. Because remember, our brains are wired to be efficient and they don't like to exert more energy than they have to. So again, I like to think of this as like the brain's filing cabinet. When everything has a place, it's much easier to find. But imagine opening your filing cabinet and someone dumped every folder onto the floor. That's ADHD brain. And it's like, I know I have, when someone with ADHD says, I know I have those papers somewhere, well, they're probably telling the truth, they do, but they're not necessarily forgetting. They just don't know where they put it. So like, it's like student backpacks. Like there's like crumpled up papers, there's broken pencils, there's a snack wrapper from 3 months ago and like a moldy apple, like in the bottom of the backpack, and if someone's like, well, just get organized, okay, well, how? So again, if we never teach organization, we can't expect people to be organized. And again, one of the biggest things that I see is that we overcomplicate. I hate this. Again, is we overcomplicate organization. We don't need 20 folders. Maybe we need 3. Like we don't need a bunch of opaque bins. We need clear bins because if I can't see it as a person with ADHD, it doesn't exist. That's why people with ADHD will have piles. Like we have our systems, like they're not put away. And I know exactly where it is, and if my husband moves my pile, I'm like, where did you put that? And he's like, well, where it goes. I'm like, it doesn't go there. Like, why are you putting my shoes in the closet? Or that's ridiculous. Like, I need to be able to see them so I can find them, right? We have our own systems. If we can't see it, it doesn't exist. If your child is constantly forgetting your backpack or their lunch or their shoes, create a launch pad by the door. Everything lives there. At the end of every day, we come in, we drop it there. That's the spot. That's the spot. And then we know when the next morning I know where my backpack is. And again, you want to build an environment that remembers for the brain. Like if your child comes in and throws everything on the kitchen counter, then maybe the kitchen counter is trying to tell you that that's where that system belongs. Is it pretty always? No. Is it annoying? No. Is your OCD going to drive you crazy? Yes. Yes. But sometimes we fight the person, but we should be redesigning the environment. So maybe you just need a bin on the kitchen counter so it's the catch-all. When they come in, they throw their things there, and that's where all their stuff is. And then you can kind of scoot it to the side and hope they still find it in the morning. But again, pay attention to what the brain is trying to tell you. So again, everything has a place, color-coded folders, but don't overcomplicate it. Visual organization, again, those clear bins. We also have to manage our expectations of it's not going to be perfect, but maybe we have 3 bins and our stuff just goes in those bins. And if they're in the bins, fine. Is it perfect? No, but at least they're not in the middle of the floor. So, oh my gosh. All right. So then planning and prioritizing. So this one's a little different than task initiation. With task initiation, you know what to do, but you just can't seem to get yourself started. Planning and prioritizing, you have no idea where to start. And so if you've ever looked at a huge project and just immediately felt overwhelmed and you shut down, maybe you do nothing, or maybe you start with the easiest thing, or, the fun thing, or the thing that actually wasn't due first. I like to think of planning and prioritizing as the brain's project manager. So imagine you're building a house. Well, you don't just show up and start nailing, right? You've got to have a plan. You've got to have materials. You've got to have, all these things before you can just start. So again, you have to, your brain tells you what needs to get done first, what can wait, what's the most important, what depends on something else being finished. So everything in the ADHD brain feels equally as important or equally as unimportant. And their brains sometimes struggle to prioritize, this thing needs to happen first, or, I need to make sure this is done before anything else. And so again, this is why I see students sit down with a worksheet that has 25 math problems on it, and then they just completely shut down. And it's not because they can't do the math, it's just because their brain is thinking, where do I even begin? So again, if planning and prioritizing is the bottleneck, what's going to help? Again, break those projects into smaller steps and backward plan from the due date. So start with the due date and work backwards. That's a really helpful one. Create mini deadlines. Okay, the first part of this I'm going to have done by this time. Or, prioritize together. Sit down with your kids and make a list. Must do, should do, could do. We do this as teachers all the time on the board. It's your must do and your may do list. Must do, you have to get these things done first. And then if you finish all those things, these are the things you may do. Graphic organizers are great. I love those. I use them all the time with my students because it really helps them say this needs to come first, next, last, right? And again, I'm the same way. I'm a very visual learner. I need to see it on paper. Again, if I'm trusting my brain, it's not going to be good for anyone. So I need to get it out onto paper and be able to, scratch it out and make adjustments and set many deadlines for myself. All right. Sorry, we're rushing. I just got to get through a lot. All right. So this one, oh, wait. Y'all are going to see me get real vulnerable here. All right. So what happens when life doesn't go according to plan? All right. And this is our second to last executive function. And this is called cognitive flexibility, which sounds fancier than it is. But it's actually something that every single one of us have probably experienced. You've had your whole day planned out. You have a vision. It's going to be great. It's going to be perfect. You're going to wake up. You're going to do this. You know what you're going to wear. All of a sudden, one little thing changed and you're like, I'm going to cancel the whole day. I'm going to cancel the whole day. This is not the plan. I'm just going to cancel everything. And, you had a picture in your mind of exactly how you wanted the day to go. And then life happened. The restaurant was closed, or the weather changed, or someone canceled, traffic made you late, and you're frustrated. And hold on, we'll come back to that. I like to think of cognitive flexibility is the brain's GPS system. So if you're driving somewhere and you miss a turn, your GPS doesn't like yell at you and be like, oh my gosh, you're stupid. Like, I can't believe you missed that turn, right? Or it doesn't just quit on you. She just calmly says, recalculating. Okay. So sometimes our brains need to just recalculate. There is a flaw on me. Oh my gosh. Plans change, expectations change, life changes, but healthy executive functioning helps us to recalculate. But again, especially with ADHD, that recalculating can take a little longer. And I actually have the perfect example. Will my volume work if I play a video? I probably should have asked that before this presentation started. That is called planning and prioritizing that I did not do. All right. Oh, no. All right. So I'm going to get really vulnerable with you guys. And I found this video recently, and I'm going to embarrass my daughter. But when she was little, I traced her hand. You know how you'll trace your kid's hand. And apparently I connected the bottom differently than she envisioned this bottom to be. And she's very much a perfectionist still to this day, 10 years later. So then this happened.
Well, what's wrong with that one?
Probably should have checked. Oh, there we go. All right, here we go, guys.
Who knows how loud this is going to be.
Oh, what did I do?
Well, what's wrong with that one?
Right here, Mommy, right here.
I did. I traced your hand.
No, right here. It's broken.
It's not broken.
No, this is broken.
I think you're being a little ridiculous.
I'm not ridiculous. Ever. Never. Mommy, never.
I think you need to lose your attitude.
No, I'm not.
Excuse me?
That's not fair.
What's not fair?
Nothing. All right. So pause. So again, I handle that the exact opposite way that I want you guys to handle that. So this is before I know what I know now, right? So again, she had this vision in her mind of how this hand was supposed to look, and I did not meet the expectation. And then I'm making it worse in the moment. I'm like, it's fine, and I'm not, I could have just been like, oh, I see that, you had something different in mind, or, whatever, but instead, again, here, the hand wasn't the problem. It's just she had already created this picture in her mind of exactly how it was supposed to look. And when I drew something different, her little brain had a really hard time of letting go of plan A. And, that's cognitive flexibility. And if I could go back to that moment, because if you listen to me, I tell her, I'm like, you're being ridiculous to my 2-year-old, and I'm not ridiculous ever. And, I probably would have said, oh, I know that's not what you pictured, was it? I'm not, see the difference? I'm not, agreeing that the hand is broken. I'm just acknowledging that her expectation was broken. And I think we do this all the time. We just say, it's not a big deal, get over it, all these things. But in her brain, it didn't feel fine. That was also the bottleneck, could have been a little emotional regulation as well. So again, if cognitive flexibility is our bottleneck, what helps? Again, not in this situation, but you can give transition warnings. I do the same thing now. Like if I'm like, okay, I'll be like, hey, we're going to be leaving in 30 minutes. And then I'll say, hey, we've got about 15 more minutes and we're going to leave. Hey, we've got about 5 more minutes and we're going to leave. All right. I am managing her expectation, because if I just say we're leaving at 8 and then 8 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, get in the car, she is going to lose her mind. All right. Because like she, in her mind, like 8 o'clock, what does that mean to my 10-year-old? No, she don't. 8 o'clock, whatever, but if I'm like, hey, 30 more minutes, 15 more minutes, like she can manage that. So again, maybe you set a timer, you prepare for changes ahead of time. Again, if you're going into something, and again, we can't always prepare for this. Sometimes life just happens. But if there's a situation where there's a good chance that it may not go exactly as planned, you could say ahead of time, hey, just so you know, this is our game plan for today. In the event that something else happens, we're going to do this, and that's okay. Like, go ahead and prepare them for a plan B. Okay. Then again, validate the disappointment. Like I can say like, oh, that's not how you pictured it was going to be, was it? And then I can model adapting. I can model, and I could sit down and say, oh, well, this actually, I would connect this to the arm and I left it open because I would, this is leaving room for the wrist or whatever. In that moment, she probably would have threw it at me, but again, I always say, have a backup plan for your backup plan. And again, can we always do that? No. But, many times we can. Or even just saying before you leave somewhere, okay, this is the plan. We're going to go here, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And again, we're just preparing them for what the day is going to look like. And sometimes just managing their expectation goes a long way. So again, it's a skill that has to be taught. I'm still the same way. If I have a vision, I'm very much a perfectionist. And if it doesn't go that way, I'm going to ruminate on it. And again, do as I say, not as I do. All right. So again, here's our last executive function. And this is called self-monitoring. And this one kind of ties a lot of the other ones together. And have you ever been, this happens to me every day, but have you ever been like telling a story and then, you start looking at the person's face and you're like, I've said too much. I need to shut up. Like, always. That happens to me every second of every day. And it's like, I have enough self-awareness to know after I said it that I shouldn't have, but again, it was too late, like at that point, because in the moment I wasn't self-monitoring because I was just in flow and I was just gapping. So this is just the ability to notice your own thoughts and behaviors. And again, kids really struggle with this. It's kind of that metacognition of being able to think about our thinking. And it's really a higher level thinking that, a lot of people and kids don't have, something that has to be taught. So again, think of this like the brain's mirror. And again, you can't change what you don't notice. So if kids don't notice these things and they don't have that self-awareness, then they're not going to change it because they didn't notice it was there. And it's, unrealistic to ask someone to change something that they can't see. So this really just allows us to step back and take a look at ourselves and say, how am I doing? Am I on task? I actually had a student who was probably my most difficult as far as challenging behavior student I had with ADHD. And one thing that we finally started to see progress with was the self-monitoring strategy, where I bought a cheap potty training watch off of Amazon. And it was like a smartwatch, but it just, you could set timers, it would just vibrate. You could turn an alarm, but I had it on vibrate so it didn't disturb the other kids. And it started out every 15 minutes, it would go off. And he had to go to his desk, he had a checklist on his desk, and it said, am I on task? Are my hands and feet to myself? Are they, whatever his goals were. And he would check those off and he would look at the teacher and give him a thumbs up. And if she kind of agreed with like, you're good. Cause again, you're learning that self-monitoring. So sometimes he was like, I was great. And she was like, no, you weren't. And so again, but it got to the point where it wasn't even about the checklist anymore. That timer kind of set something off in his brain where he would just stop whatever he was doing. And then it made him stop and think, well, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Where am I supposed to be? But again, when before nothing would just make him stop. And so again, this became huge for him. And it became not about the checklist. It just became about now I'm going to check in with my body. I'm going to see, how's my body feeling? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And again, it was like this $10 potty. It was meant for potty training, to remind kids like, oh, go to the potty, whatever. And he didn't know it was a potty training watch. It was just a black plain watch, but it was huge for him. And then at the end of the day, when he would have to come and turn the watch into me, and he would bring me his checklist, and he would get, little punches on his punch card. And if he had met his, if you were doing 3 out of the 5 things, because I'm not unreasonable, I don't expect him to be perfect. If you're doing 3 out of those 5 things when it went off this many times during the day, you get a prize out of the prize box, or you get lunch. He loved time with me. That was like his favorite thing, was to hang out with me. So maybe we'd have lunch and I'd make Kraft Easy Mac and we'd do whatever. So again, self-monitoring is huge. Even a lot of adults don't have a lot of self-awareness in what they're doing and saying. So again, this is a skill. So within this, there's another executive functioning called response inhibition, and it kind of goes hand in hand with self-monitoring, and we don't have time to do an entire section on it tonight. But basically, if self-monitoring is the mirror, then that response inhibition is the brakes. And like if you're driving a car, first you notice a stop sign, you know, and that's self-monitoring. And then you press the brake, that's response inhibition. And if you never notice the stop sign, then the brakes don't really help, right? So noticing the stop sign doesn't help much either if your brakes don't work. They work together. And so when someone blurts out an answer, interrupts, acts before thinking, I struggle with this very much. Like if people are talking too slow, I've tried to finish their sentences for them. And a lot of kids struggle with that too. My response inhibition is very low on my scale when I take that quiz. Just acting before thinking, or like it flies out of your mouth. Like my mouth goes faster than my brain does. And then after, you know, that lag catches up, those 3 seconds later, I'm like, oh, what is wrong with me? Like, why did I say that? But again, so sometimes our brakes don't work fast enough. But some strategies for this, self-checklist, like I said, visual reminders, reflection questions, video modeling, specific feedback, and just built-in pause and check routine. Just stop, check in. You know, maybe you set a timer, and those are things that you practice. And you're like, okay, like maybe during a task, you're playing with brother and sister, and you're like, all right, everybody freeze. What were we doing with our bodies? What were we doing here? And again, that's something you would do with younger kids. For older kids, again, it's the same thing. Maybe I need to set an alarm to get up and stretch, or, you know, whatever, to just help me check in with my body, make sure I'm staying on task. But again, you can't change what you don't notice. And sometimes we have to help kids notice. All right. We're out of time. All right, really quick. So case file number 1. I want everybody to put on your detective caps for me. Everybody thinking caps. And we've talked about 8 different executive functions tonight, and that's a lot. But the good news is you don't have to memorize all 8. You just have to remember one thing: find the bottleneck, right? So, and then you can choose the right support. And so that's what we're going to practice here. So because ADHD isn't multiple choice, sometimes there are more than one bottlenecks. Sometimes there's 2 or 3. And so this isn't about finding a perfect answer. It's just learning to ask better questions. So for these cases, you're going to see these questions. What's the behavior? What the executive function might be? And then what clues kind of led you to the conclusion, and what support would you try first? So I want you to picture this. There is a 5th grader, comes home from school, grabs a snack, sits down at the kitchen table and mom says, go ahead and go do your homework. They stare at the paper, they sharpen their pencil, they get another stack, they pet the dog, they reorganize their backpack, they ask if they can use the bathroom, and 45 minutes later, they haven't answered a single question. All right, what's the behavior? What are we seeing? Maybe task initiation. Well, that's that could be the bottleneck, right? But what are the behaviors, right? The homework's untouched, they're getting up, they're avoiding, maybe they're crying when they're reminded, you know, but then once they start, usually they're done in like 10 minutes, right? If they can just get started. So again, those good answers. So there's actually, I can see several possibilities. Task initiation, they can't get started. Maybe it's planning and prioritizing. Maybe they don't know where to start. Working memory, maybe they forgot the directions. Okay, maybe they forgot what you just told them because you gave them verbal directions. If you give me verbal directions to go somewhere, I will be lost. If you tell me your name, I cannot repeat your name back to you. All right, I've got to associate it with something. That working memory. You know, maybe time blindness. Maybe they truly didn't realize that 45 minutes had passed. And, you know, so what do you think are some supports that might actually help? Oh, again, so we said, you know, those were some of the bottlenecks. And then what were the clues that led you to your conclusion? The time passed. Untouched. All right. Exactly. And so, what are some supports do you think might help if task initiation is the bottleneck? What are some things that you could do to help them get started? Break it into smaller pieces. What else? Body doubling, big one. Timer. Write down what he needs to do. Great. Awesome. Absolutely give them a choice. That's going to be a huge one because their brains are going to feel like it's in control. Perfect. All right. So again, you didn't go in there yelling at them and you're like, I told you to do your homework 45 minutes ago. And what are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. You're coming at it like a detective and you're like, okay, well, these are all the things I just noticed. I'm calm, cool, and collected. I'm regulated. So here's the problem. All right. Instead of just going in and trying to put out this dumpster fire, I'm going to say, all right, well, maybe this is the bottleneck. Maybe he just can't get started. How can I help him get started?
I have an idea.
Yeah.
I just thought about income, what you mentioned last session.
Interest-driven nervous system.
So
yes.
Maybe a way to motivate the start would be try to get him curious about the homework.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for, that was excellent. That interest-driven nervous system, maybe he's avoiding it. It's that task avoidance because he's not interested in it. Maybe he hates math. Maybe math makes him feel stupid. All right. I had a kid who we had to go on a field trip for baseball. He hated baseball, but he loved math. So his was kind of the opposite. It was weird. So I took a book of baseball statistics, math for baseball. How do they figure out batting average? How do they figure out the distance between the bases or whatever? I made it interesting to him. So maybe you sort of gamify the homework and you're like, oh, this, maybe you sometimes even just a sticker. If I put a Pokemon sticker on a worksheet, they're like, oh, this is Pokemon math, and all of a sudden they're interested in doing it. So again, just make it interesting to them. But you're absolutely right. That interest-driven nervous system is huge. Well, I don't have time to go through all of them. But again, we are out of time, but here are some of my favorite ADHD tools and resources. I put a lot of those on your page as well, but I wanted to show you really quick Goblin tools. So this one I love, I use it all the time, and there's different things. Yes. I don't know. Oh, share something else. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So Goblin tools is, I learned about it at a conference and it does lots of different things. You can, if you're feeling indecisive, you can consult it. It'll help you make a decision. It'll even create a recipe from ingredients that you have laying around your house, which is really cool. This is the time estimator where you can guess an activity's time frame. Like it'll guesstimate how long something should take you to do. This is great for kids. Then the magic to do. So this is the one that I love. So I put in here, clean my room. And over here, you'll see these chili peppers. So if I want lots of steps, I'm going to give it lots of chili peppers. If I just need like a couple steps, I just kind of want to get started, I can make it less. So this, I put lots of chili peppers, and look how many steps it broke it down to. Then next to it, it even estimated like how long it would take you to do it. This said 1 day and 1 hour. Clearly they're in my house because it is a disaster. So you can change the order of the things. But again, we get so overwhelmed. If someone would just tell us where to start, sometimes that really helps. All right, gather all the cleaning supplies. Go get your trash bags. Go get your 409 and your, furniture polish. All right. Then identify the specific areas that need cleaning. All right, put on the right clothes. Again, this was broken down into way more steps than you need. You can clear off surfaces. All right, I'm just going to do the desk, the nightstand, and the dressers. I'm just going to take all the stuff off those. Again, it's really cool, but you can do it with anything. You can say, teach me how to change a flat tire. It will break it down into steps. Love this. This is really cool. Again, then we've got the estimator, we've got, you enter the activity, it will estimate how much time. And again, you can like, how difficult is it for you to focus on the activity? You can adjust it. So again, you know, something, if I know I'm going to get real distracted, it's like, okay, realistically, this is going to take you an hour, but you know, somebody else, it might take them 5 minutes. So I love that because I can adjust it based on how distractible I am. But again, there's lots of information, there's lots of different tools on your slides. So again, don't like frantically feel like you have to write everything down. There's tons of stuff on there that I would really encourage you to go home, Google, try it out for yourself, play around with it. There's a million things that this does. But again, I just really want you to remember, don't ask, how do I stop this behavior? We're going to ask, what's the bottleneck? What executive function is struggling? What does the brain need right now? And then choose the right support. All right, this week's detective challenge. All right, don't try to fix everything. Just pick one behavior. All right, find one bottleneck and try one new support. And then give it time before deciding it worked. All right, but then you're going to report back to me when you're here next week. And you're going to say, I found the behavior, I found the bottleneck, I tried the support, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but we're going to stick with it and we're going to give it time and we're going to give it repetition before we decide whether or not it worked. And remember, every behavior has a story. So thank you guys for coming.